Today we're talking brakes on Corvette. First, I'm going over ordering. The second part of this is going to be characteristics, some things you may or may not have known. On Z06, right, specifically Z06, E-Ray, ZR1, ZR1X. J56 is the 371 millimeter iron brake that comes standard on Z06. Not available on E-Ray, ZR1, or ZR1X. That brake is completely standard across the line unless you click Z07. Z07 is only available with J57. J57 is going to be the 400 millimeter and 390 millimeter carbon ceramic matrix rotors. All right, so first off, standard on E-Ray, standard on Z07. The big reasons we do this, there's some big wear items where these are significantly more durable than your iron rotors. Yes, it's like a $10,000 option on Z06, but I'm going to tell you why I think it's actually a pretty good investment up front. These things have 4 or 5 times the life of a standard iron brake setup. And what that means is if you drive this thing on the street, they're going to wear like boot leather. Like, you may never wear these out. These could be a 100,000-mile brake for you. On the racetrack, they have a significantly higher operating range, and they do have better wear characteristics, yet again, on track. So I'm going to tell you, everybody associates so much cost with carbon ceramic brakes, but I would tell you if you're changing iron brakes 4 to 1, that the iron brakes are probably going to actually cost you more. It's just a prolonged cost, and it's something you're going to do as you go versus buy ones, cry ones, so to speak. There's a lot of different characteristics that go with that, but moving on, I'll go into that a little bit deeper. J58. J58 is the CCB plus compound. Okay, this is the same size, right? J58 is on ZR1. That is your standard ZR1 brake. CCB Plus is a generational update to the J57. They're both Brembo brakes. They're similar compositions, but just like anything, either you're going to see more durability, better wear on track, and there are some visual differences. Again, I'll dig into that a little bit deeper. And that's only available on ZR1, standard on ZR1. J59. These are the 10-piston Alcons. These are 420 millimeters in the front, 420 millimeters in the rear. These are going on all ZR1X. These have a different rotor compound too. This is a ST compound, not made by Brembo, so we went away from that for that one. But the big thing here is they're bigger, they're more durable, but they're made because the car has more mass. It's heavier and it's faster. So that's only available on ZR1X. However, it is optional on ZR1. We've noticed that constraints have kept a lot of ZR1s from getting J59, which is standard on the ZTK package. You click ZTK, you're getting J59 Alcons that have the ST rotors. So that's the rundown on ordering. Okay, J56 is standard on Z06. J57 is standard on Z07 model Z06 and E-Ray. That is the CCM compound. J58 is going to be standard on ZR1, and that is the CCB plus compound. And J59 is standard on ZR1X and optional on ZR1. However, constraint quantities have largely precluded those from being put on. Now, let's go into details. Performance. When we drop 10 pounds off each corner of this car, of rotational mass, the performance benefits are enormous. I don't know if it's true, but it used to be you thought about every pound of unsprung or rotational mass was good for about 7 pounds of static mass. So if you think about it, 40 pounds, you're dropping significant weight because you're not turning it. And what does that do? It makes everything easier. It makes cornering, braking, accelerating, everything. Performance. The first thing you notice is these rotors are bigger, significantly bigger. They're about 30 millimeters bigger. The reason you do that with carbon ceramics is to shed heat from the surface. More surface area lets us shed heat more. The big difference between these two is they really have polar opposite personalities. A iron brake is going to have the best friction, coefficient of friction when it's at room temperature. Whereas the carbon ceramics are going to need some heat. Ceramic is a wonderful insulator. It's why you see it on so many things doing that. But you need to get them warm. So on a colder day, when you go out, you may notice it's going to take more pedal pressure to achieve the stopping distance and power that you're looking for. It's not anything, there's nothing wrong with it, and that's for J57, 58, and 59. There's nothing wrong with it. That is a characteristic of it, where the iron brake rotors will work very good at room temperature, and they do have pretty good heat resistance just because of their density and mass. The carbon rotor is going to take more time to get the heat into it, and it needs a little bit of heat to be working right. You know, you're going to notice that between a J56 and a 57, 58, and 59, there's a significantly different burnishing procedure. Now, a burnishing procedure is how you would bed the brakes or burnish them. What you're really doing is getting them hot, and you're getting a layer off of the pad to the surface of the rotor, somewhat of a transfer layer, if you will. And the reason that it is a more drawn out process and it's more rigorous is because they take more time to get heat in. So just by virtue of the fact that they take more time, it takes more heat, more time to get the heat to make the transfer layer happen onto the rotor face. There's nothing wrong with the iron rotors. If you're looking at doing different wheel combinations, all that stuff, there's nothing wrong with them. One thing you're going to notice, most people will look at the carbon rotors. One, it's the look. I mean, they look awesome. They tend to be less dusty. You know, a lot of people are pretty sensitive to dust when it comes to brakes. And, you know, personally, I'm looking at it from a durability standpoint. You know, my 10 grand up front is going to pay for more than its share of what it would on the iron brakes as I go. And frankly, I like the stability. It seems like the carbon ceramics, they live in this really nice sweet spot on track where they're very predictable and they're very consistent. You actually notice that like an iron rotor will kind of get to a peak and kind of drop off, and it lives in a nice area too. It's just the heat affects it completely differently. You know, these rotors, by and large, you know, on paper, they're only 10 pounds a piece less. Only, I say that, you're talking about 24 to 14 pounds. If you looked at the rotor material and you took the aluminum hat off and just looked at the carbon ring versus the iron ring, you're gonna find the carbons are about a third of the weight. So they don't have all that mass to shed the heat like a iron rotor does. It takes longer to permeate, and it can then shed the heat, like if you're on a straightaway, so to speak. Whereas the carbon rotors, they're using the surface because they don't have the density. They don't have the density of mass to work as a big heat sink. So getting more air over the surface is what's helping cool them. Again, I look at the durability thing. I think that's huge. If you're a track guy, I think you look real hard at it. I've heard the J58s wear better than the J57s. Since we're talking about that, let's go over some of the generational differences. J57 is a carbon ceramic matrix, right? You're gonna see they're more porous. You're gonna see the strands of carbon. They're a little more visible. Now, when we move to J58, that is what they call CCB plus. And what that is basically the next iteration. If you saw the black wings, we had CCBs on those. And just visually, you'll notice the surface of that rotor is smoother, shinier. When you get close to it, you'll look, and it's almost like there's these little micro, they're not cracks, but you'll see like there's these little fractures across the face. And obviously that's part of the composition, but they do look considerably different. And what that is, it's a high density silicon carbide layer on the top. Now, what is that going to do? Well, we know it's going to be for heat resistance and wear. And frankly, I think they end up looking better over the long run of the life of the rotor. CCM is not a particularly new technology. I've seen these on Ferraris from the mid 2000s. These rotors, that composition dates back to C6. When you saw C6 ZR1, and then for a brief moment in time, we had C6 Z07, which if you've ever seen one of those, I think it was 2011, the Carbon Edition cars, dude, pick it up. That car sounds and drives and brakes like that is like a sweet spot. All right, no more ADHD. So the CCM was something we had seen on Ferrari, Corvette, Porsche, all those coming up. Now, we've seen CCB and now CCB Plus. You've seen it more on larger vehicles. You'll see like the Lamborghini Urus. A lot of the Porsche PCBs are the CCB and CCB Plus. AMG, AMG has some pretty big, gnarly sedans, and they have some monster CCB brakes on them. So, yes, that is the next iteration. Now, the ZR1X, I don't know much about the ST compound, so I'm not going to really go into it a whole lot. There's something to do with it having longer strands of carbon. The one I saw up close, again, the rotor face is like a mirror finish. So my inclination is to say that these are, they're going to be great for durability, and they're going to be, being on the ZR1X, this is like, it's going to be absolutely awesome. Now, all that being said, these are some of the differences. When you go from a iron brake car to a Z06 with the J57s, the braking profile is a lot different. Just like I talked the other day about Stingray drivability versus Z06 drivability. A lot of people early on would tell me, man, I got in the Z06 and man, the brakes, I had to push them pretty hard. You're going to have to. That's a characteristic. Like I said, the characteristic of iron versus carbon is kind of inverted. They need heat. Heat is not the enemy. When we're talking about that. So just know that. So when you get in the car the first time, be it E-Ray, be it Z06 with Z07, or Z06 with J57, which is a free flow option, know that is different. That's a difference you're going to have to adjust to, and it's not a big deal. It's a little more pedal pressure. They stop wonderfully. And as time goes on, as they get burnished in, you're going to notice they're going to have more, better initial bite characteristics and all that. The one thing I can tell you is from driving most of these, I can't say I've driven them all. I've not driven a car with the STs on it, so I have no real, feedback on that. I would tell you I like the profile of the carbon brake. I like to drive a car pretty hard, really hard, and they're so consistent. I really don't want to have anything different because when I'm driving, and I know the Corvette now has an e-boost, brake system. It's still hydraulic, but yes, it's e-boost. It's just the consistency and confidence. Anybody that's been on a racetrack, I think we can all agree on one thing. There's nothing more unnerving than not being confident in your brakes. That's why if you're going to do a track day, if you're going to do these things, like we stock, Castrol SRF here because it's a super high temp fluid. I think it's got like a 524 degree wet boiling point. So we use that for our brake flushes, and they're not even that expensive. So when you go to the track, remember, you got to put fluid in it. You got to do the right things, man, because these cars are rocket ships, man, and the last thing in the world you want is to lose your brakes, and certainly not from a maintenance or negligence standpoint. If you have more questions, that's what I'm here for. I dove into a bit of a black hole this weekend because I wasn't feeling great, so I started researching all these brakes and compounds and all of that. So I'm not speaking from an expert standpoint. I'm an enthusiast. At any point, if I'm wrong, and I very well could be, please correct me in the comments. I'm not an expert, and I know there's people that I deal with that are. If I'm off on any of this, please correct me. The last thing I want to do is put bad information out there. I think this was just more of a clarity in what's available and pros and cons, why you may want one over the other. The few people I've talked to with the ZR1s, they're pretty happy with the J58s. So, if you're sitting there and you're holding out for that ZTK allocation, I mean, I'm telling you, there has not been many of them. I don't know that I would pass up an opportunity to get a ZR1 because I couldn't get the Alcon brakes. The Alcons are awesome, I'm sure of it, but I'm gonna go refer back to my earlier video where I said, I don't know how many of us are able to be driver enough to take these things anywhere, and I mean not even in the orbit of the capability of these things. I mean, these cars are so capable these days. I don't know many humans that I can faithfully say, at least that don't have an FIA license, that I think could actually run these things to their true potential. So I get if you want it just to have it. Look, I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money, but what I am going to tell you is, you know, look at a big picture out of it, because these cars they're pretty awesome. Again, Z06 and E-Ray with these carbon ceramics, less dust, generally speaking, way more durable. And like I said, I know that the cost of entry is a little bit higher, but I'd argue go price 4 rotors and 4 sets of pads for the iron ones. Those rotors are still probably $700. So to me, if my replacement parts are only twice as much on the carbon parts, but they're going to last 4 times as long, the math catches up pretty quickly. So, you know, that's just my 2 cents. Hopefully this helps you make some decisions. If anybody wants to talk in depth about this more, I'm actually very fascinated with the technical side of things. If anybody knows anybody at Brembo or Alcon or anybody that wants to talk, dude, I'd love to. Like I said, I dove in about 10 hours of research this weekend just trying to come up with something, because I kept getting the comment. I would say, hey, this has got J57s. People are like, what are J57s? So I wanted to spell it out very clearly. I wanted people to understand what they are. I'm speaking from an enthusiast standpoint, not an expert standpoint. I'm not pretending to be. I just think this information could help. And if you have any questions, or if you do work for one of these, you know, high performance brake OEMs, like, I'd love to chat about it, because I think these are things that everybody should know. And just in the current state of the car business, I don't know many people on the retail side that are going to take the time and talk about drivability differences, whether it's drivetrain, whether it's braking system, whether it's tires, you know, any of it. So my niche has been, I'm a geek, I'm a gearhead. And, you know, when I get a man cold, I dig into finding something interesting, and that's what I did this weekend. So any questions, please drop them in the comments. And like I said, if I'm wrong, please correct me. I have no sense of pride in thinking I'm right about everything. Please, please, please correct me. I need that. Thank you guys again. Everybody's been watching and making great comments. So tell me what kind of content you guys want to see. I like straightforward technical. I like straightforward ordering, use case, feedback, any of that stuff. Like, I love that stuff. What I'm not going to do is do the typical cheesy, hey, my name's Al, come buy a car from me. That stuff's too overblown. That's a trend that can stay in 2025 as far as I'm concerned. So let me know what feedback you have, because this was something that came from me from a TikTok comment. And I'm like, that's a good idea. We should talk about this. So I know these are longer winded. I appreciate you guys watching, but any questions, throw them in the comments. I love interacting with it, and I love learning. So appreciate all you guys.